Hi, everyone, and welcome back to 8 Spotlight, the podcast brought to you by 8 Capital, where we go portfolio company by portfolio company, founder by founder, and bring you the stories behind the builders shaping the future. Today's episode is a pretty cool one. We're spotlighting Andromeda Surgical, a company building an autonomous surgery platform, and in just 18 months, they went from concept to live clinical use, performing the world's first robot-assisted laser prostate surgery, and what may have been the first surgery ever performed via iPad. They've now treated patients across multiple countries, signed LOIs with leading hospital decision makers, and partnered with Boston Scientific to integrate their laser systems. They aim to compound data and accelerate surgical autonomy. This isn't just another surgical robot. This is a software-first company operating in a hardware-dominated industry, and they believe the autonomous era of surgery is beginning now. Hi, Nick. Nice to have you here.
Hi, Samantha. Great to be here.
So you describe Andromeda as an autonomous surgery platform, not a surgical robotics company. What is the difference?
Yeah, so surgical robot means a certain thing to most people. It's very hardware focused. And what we're doing is much more focused on the software and the intelligence layer side. So we're calling it a surgery platform instead of a surgical robot to differentiate and emphasize the software element, even though there is actually a physical robot involved.
Very cool. So why was HoLEP the right beachhead procedure for this? And can you explain for viewers who might not be familiar with that, what exactly that is?
Yeah, I imagine most people don't know what HoLEP is. There's a lot of reasons for that. My last company was in urology, and I worked with the guy named Peter Gilling in New Zealand who invented HoLEP. And this is really the best procedure for BPH or enlarged prostate, which every man gets if they live long enough. So it's incredibly common. It's got the best effectiveness and also phenomenal safety, but it's hard to learn. So there was a lot of value we could add in making it easier to learn. And on top of that, urologists were the first users of robots, and they're one of the most tech-forward categories of surgeons. And so as far as the user base, we had a lot of people that were calling themselves robotic surgeons, but then doing certain procedures that were not yet robotic, that we could then give them a robot to do, and then also allow more people to adopt this procedure that has these phenomenal outcomes, but it's hard to learn.
Okay, cool. So now that we have a taste for what you do and what your company does, how exactly did this come about?
Yeah, I noticed from being in medtech, and I've been a founder in medtech 3 times now, and then was an engineer before that there were a lot of challenges that happened in the operating room, whether it was a device I was building that was hard to use, or just a surgery where a resident didn't really know what they were doing, or somebody hadn't been trained properly and things went wrong. And it's amazing how often that happens. It's been estimated about 10% of surgeries have some preventable complications.
Wow.
You're getting a lot of outcomes that are not optimal. And then I started thinking about what the solution for this was. We were entering the age of AI. It was 2023 when we first got started. And then I met up through Y Combinator with my co-founder, Karthik, who's from autonomous vehicles. He built the first autonomous truck that ever drove on a freeway. And he had also been thinking about where else can we apply autonomy besides driving, and had been thinking about surgery. So we met up. We had both been thinking about autonomous surgery. And then we just had a bunch of conversations of, is this feasible to build now? Is this the direction the future is going? And is there a path we can figure out to get from something specific as a beachhead to a broad surgical platform? And the answer to all those questions we realized was definitely yes. And then decided this was the most exciting thing we could possibly work on.
Very cool. It must have been particularly exciting to find someone who matched you with that particular passion.
Definitely. And we were both from different spaces, but both very contrarian. I've been kind of an iconoclast in medtech. I really don't like just accepting the conventional wisdom, which is the way most people operate in medtech. And so I found myself kind of a misfit in that space. And I think Karthik's the same way, where he's very first principles and really likes to drill down and ask why repeatedly to understand what the base reason behind what something is. And I think to build something new that nobody's done, most people assume you can't do it. But then when you drill down to those reasons and get to the base reality, then often you find that you can, which in this case we did.
When did you realize that this could move faster than traditional medtech?
Well, I found over the years that I've been in medtech that things are inefficient in a lot of ways. Some of those are inherent in what medtech is, that you've got hardware that's regulated. There's a lot of testing you have to do to get it there. Any change requires retesting all of that. you have to do these clinical studies, you have to go through regulatory processes, you have to spend years trying to get things reimbursed. So all those things take a lot of time and reduce the ROI of medtech. But if you operate in the software realm and don't go for specific indications, like saying we're going to treat this disease as opposed to we're a tool to help surgeons accomplish certain procedures, then you can actually avoid a lot of those burdensome steps. And the same way that software businesses have been better than hardware businesses in the past in terms of scalability in other industries, in medtech, that very much applies too. And so we wanted to optimize as much as possible on the software side, minimize hardware, and make a product that was able to be iterated in the software realm. And by doing that, we've been able to move 3 to 5x faster than anybody else in the robotic space.
So that kind of leads me into my next question, which is about you being a software company in a hardware world. So you've said previously that you are the only true software company in surgical robotics. What exactly does that mean structurally?
Whenever there's a choice to use software or hardware to solve a problem, we choose the software path. There are cases where if you want to do your own procedures, you need some hardware. You need to have a robot. We could partner with other robots. We chose not to do that. We wanted to control our own destiny. So we made the robot as minimal as possible. We have an off-the-shelf arm from KUKA, a pretty standard robot arm, and then we made a simple cart and some adapters to hold off-the-shelf tools. Everybody else does a lot more engineering on the hardware side. A lot of them have their own arms. Almost all of them own the end effector tools. So instead of saying there's already scopes or lasers or other tools that we can just hold, they make their own tools. Like we make our own scope, they make their own laser, whatever they want to do. And that's a lot of medtech hardware engineering that's going to take a very long time. It makes sense because you can actually sell those products then and make more money. But we found that we can make just as much or more while providing more value by focusing entirely on software and autonomy and not fighting all those hardware battles that most companies choose to fight.
Do you have a particular way you approach the creation of hardware that sets you aside from those who compete in the same space?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we always want to minimize it. So choosing the off-the-shelf arm, creating adapters that can control tools that are as simple as possible, that are as modular as possible, that can apply to as many tools as possible is the goal. We always want to find the most efficient long-term path to avoid having to develop too much hardware. I found also with hardware complexity that the level of testing you need to do grows more than linearly. You have not just different hardware parts, but then interfaces between those you have to test. And so from prior companies, when we had a lot of hardware, something would always go wrong and it would set you back by months when you're trying to release anything. For us, just making it as simple as possible and as static as possible, we don't need to change the hardware all the time. We just want to focus on something that works well enough, not reinventing any of the surgery itself, just allowing them to do what they do now in the software realm with autonomy is the only goal. And by staying focused on that and just choosing what to do and what not to do very deliberately is how we've been able to be much more efficient.
So you would say that focusing on software is what gives you your edge?
That is the primary thing. There are other things, but that's probably the biggest differentiator between us and everybody else. It seems obvious to people in the tech world that you would focus on software, but in medtech, it is a very, very hardware-centric space. So it's a contrarian viewpoint.
So you've helped reduce procedure times pretty significantly. What unlocked that progress?
Just being able to learn and iterate quickly. So in most clinical trials, people create a device that's mostly hardware-centric, and then you go and enroll a bunch of patients, and maybe it takes a year to do that. For us, we have this iteration cycle we've been obsessively optimizing, where we built a product that was safe and performed well in the what's called preclinical models, like the bench, cadavers, and then we went to the first patients. We didn't know in a live patient how well it would perform because you can't learn that until you go into live patients. And then we did procedures, we learned new things, we translated those learnings into new features, did bench testing, cadavers, back into humans again, and then repeated that cycle. We wanted to make that cycle as fast as possible. For most companies in medtech, it's like a year. For us, it's been a month. So we've been able to go from one version, learn, develop, test, back to clinical trials in a month over and over again.
That is an insane difference, a month versus a year. And would you say that that is because of your reliance on software versus hardware.
It is, because if we change the hardware, we would have to then go and test all those things again and usually resubmit. There's certain levels of changes that you need to resubmit back to all the regulatory authorities. And usually with hardware changes, you have to do that. And so that inherently limits your scalability. We did have some hardware things we learned that we made changes, but then we were able to iterate the software in between. Then we went through the process with the hardware. And once that was ready, we were able to kind of decouple that from the software and then release the new hardware when it was done. So there was some learning on that side, though the software was much, much more iterative than the hardware.
Us being early investors in your company, we're lucky enough to receive investor updates. And I've noticed that in them, many times you reference utilization and not revenue as your North Star metric right now. Why is that?
So if we want to make revenue in the future, the most revenue, which most companies do, and we do too, we're not an exception, then the question is, what's the important thing to focus on to get us to that point, to maximize the future revenue? And we found that it is not maximizing early term revenue, it's maximizing utilization. So you want to have a product that the users really like, get a lot of value out of, and use a lot. And that's also, there's another reason why that's going to be helpful, because as an AI product, the data we get from that utilization then feeds back into better features that make the product better. And so both of those things are going to beget future revenue much more than current revenue would. And so I've also seen from people that are in surgical robots, a lot of companies, and there's been a few examples in the last couple of years, where companies have come out of the gate and sold lots of robots and grown incredibly fast. Then they shut down or had recaps or down rounds, and it ended up just burning out because they didn't optimize the user experience and the utilization. They had a bunch of robots sitting out there that were just collecting dust. And then eventually that came back to bite them, where people realized these things weren't getting used and they weren't delivering value, and that hit their future sales. So for us, that we really want to make sure this is delivering the value, and the inherent value of the product will drive the future sales.
You're doing all the hard work up front, which is smart because it means you won't shut down later.
Right.
So, okay, what was it like witnessing the first live robot-assisted HOLEP case? Because that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's always really exciting to see your product used for the first time in the clinic. I've now having built a few different products. It's exciting and nerve-wracking. You always worry that you miss something in the testing. You always try to test everything extensively, but you worry you miss something. It was amazing to see this in this case that it went really well. In the first case, I mean, as far as usability, there were things that could have been better for sure. But then as far as the case went, the safety was phenomenal. The surgeon's experience was really good. And we learned a lot of things, most importantly, that allowed us to then quickly make these iterative changes that have made the product way better now than it was a year or so ago when we first got started in the clinic.
Incredible. That's so fun. Considering that you guys are a US-based company, why launch first in New Zealand?
So it turns out that HOLEP was invented in New Zealand, and the inventor I mentioned, Dr. Peter Gilling there, has been a key part of the company. Actually, I called him up before we started going down this path, and I asked him on that call, what would you think if we built this kind of product and had HOLEP as the first use case? And he just said that sounds incredible. I'm very supportive. I'll help with whatever you need to get that to happen. He having invented the procedure and having seen that it's better in terms of outcomes, has just been saying for 25 years since this thing was invented that everybody needs to do this because this is right for the patients. And it's been slowly taken up. It's taken years for everybody to, train, and then you train from Dr. Gilling, and then you go back to your center and you have to practice a bit, and then you can finally train people. Those cycles have been so slow. It took a long time to really catch on, but now it's growing really fast. There's a lot of demand for people to learn it, but it's perceived to be hard. So that's bottlenecking how many can learn it. And he was excited to see that this is the solution to that bottleneck. So then when I've been down there, we've been doing trials down in New Zealand, and I've met with a lot of other surgeons. There's actually a lot of other HOLEP enthusiasts down there that are eager to use new tech to help with the procedure. And so we found a few others that are also interested in using it. Though we're not going to be in New Zealand for that long. We're coming to the US, we're coming to Canada, other countries as well.
I love that HOLEP enthusiasts are a thing. I have never known that to be a niche before, and I'm so glad I'm learning about it.
It's crazy. It's actually one of among all the surgeries I've seen, this is one that people who do it are really fanatical about it. And that was the reason to do this also, that people really care about HOLEP. They really think this is the right thing for the patients. Everybody should do it. And when you give them a tool to accomplish that mission they have, then they love it.
That's awesome. So, you guys have signed LOIs from top hospital decision makers, some who don't typically sign early agreements. Do you think that your early success in New Zealand has helped convince them?
It has. I mean, having the top influencers in the space, both Peter Gilling in New Zealand, and then there's a guy named Fernando Gomez Sancha in Spain, who's the biggest social media influencer in the HOLEP world. And so everybody learns with his YouTube videos. So we have the traditional HOLEP influencer who talks at the conferences. We have the new generation one that's on social media. And so it goes a long way. When people hear from those surgeons, then that builds a lot of credibility to get them over the line to sign up for an LOI. It's non-binding, of course, because we can't sign anything binding before FDA clearance or whatever clearance in the country that we're in. Though we found that plus the surgeon champions have helped us get through the administrative process faster. I liken surgeons sometimes to professional athletes where there's a management group that's managing a sports team and they want to keep the athletes happy and satisfied. And if the surgeons want stuff enough, then that can help you get it in. It's got to, of course, deliver value. They do want to see that this is going to produce a positive ROI. We've also, because we're optimizing for usage, we have not asked them to pay too much at this point in the LOIs. So we've kept the price relatively low. We just want to get it used as much as possible. That's also helped. In advance of having hard data to show this thing makes money for hospitals, then you need to have them take kind of a leap of faith. And if it's not too expensive, then it's easier to do that.
I still can't get over the fact that there are HOLEP influencers. How important are partnerships like the one with Boston Scientific in accelerating adoption?
Yeah, I mean, we've signed partnerships with Boston, with Quanta, another laser company, and with Richard Wolf, a scope company. And it's been incredibly helpful. All these have been great partners for us as we've developed this. They've made intros for us to people that are doing HOLEP. That's been great. They've been supportive, in all different things we do. They've helped us with development. They've helped us acquire things we need for our development. So yeah, I mean, having them involved, having this ecosystem of people that build things for these procedures is great. You have to, for us to be kind of the glue at the center of the HOLEP world is something that they definitely get behind. We hope that we'll make a lot more revenue for them as they sell more of their products in the future. And I think as we develop beyond this, we want to keep extending these partnerships where anybody who's making tools for surgery, the medtech companies that do that, whether it's a scope or laser like a tool, or if it's an interventional device, even we've talked to companies, we have a couple LOIs with companies that are startups making medical devices where they want to solve their usability by running it robotic autonomously. So we want to be the hub at the center of every operating room, and we want to work with everybody who's building tools that are currently doing things in operating rooms.
So what you're saying is that essentially this isn't just for HOLEP.
No, it's going to be a broad surgical platform, even in the next few years. We have other procedures that we're launching, possibly even into the clinic this year with our second procedure. And we do expect to be in most of what's called endourology, kind of less invasive urology procedures in the next few years. And then beyond that, we want to make this as broad as possible. There's a lot of economies of scale that come with launching different procedures on the same platform. So it's, a better deal for the hospital than buying a different robot platform for every procedure they do. And because we're in software, we can scale this really fast. There's what we call a foundational model for surgery, where we are training the models on certain surgical tasks, and those are repeated across different procedures. So it gets easier and easier to build the next thing and the next thing the farther we go. We might start with 1 or 2 new procedures per year in the beginning and then go to 5 or more within a few years.
That's really exciting. So with all of these new expansions, how are you thinking about regulatory sequencing across the FDA, Canada, et cetera?
Our strategy in general is going for broader claims that cover a range of procedures. So whether that's all of urology or procedures that involve a rigid endoscope or something that defines some set of procedures and not some specific procedure. Most companies in the medtech world go for, we're going to treat this condition. Like we're going to treat enlarged prostate, we're going to treat prostate cancer or kidney stones or whatever it is. And that has a lot higher burden of proof. Then you need to show that whatever you do is as good as the standard of care or better in treating that condition. You need to follow the patients over a long term and do a lot of cases to get significance on that. For us, it's really all about safety and performance. Is it safe? Is it causing any other safety risk?
Right.
And is it performing well? Is it something that the surgeon is able to use effectively to complete the procedure? So that's what we're focused on. And that, because we're doing that approach and then defining it as a category of procedures, there's a lot less regulatory complexity in this, whether it's in the US with FDA or elsewhere. And then one really important feature, that one important regulatory program that we're leveraging that is very new and actually enables this kind of company to be built, is what's called Predetermined Change Control Plan from FDA or PCCP. And that allows you to make changes to models, to software that you predefined beforehand without having to go through the whole process again. And so it's, instead of having to file new 510Ks, which is what the FDA filing is called, over and over again, we can make a lot of changes at a faster cadence as long as we agree with FDA on how we're going to develop and test those. So we're doing that to be able to deploy things really fast, faster than hospitals and surgeons are used to seeing.
Yeah, that sounds really convenient. So, one of your goals, according to your investor updates, is that you guys are trying to pretty significantly increase your utilization year over year. What changes at that scale when you succeed?
Yeah, so the main reason we're doing this is to collect the data we need to build the advanced autonomy features. And scaling is not going to be easy. I don't want to say that it's easy to go from, 10 cases per month to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000. There's new challenges at all those levels of scale. And because this is a new category of product, there are things that we're going to have to learn the hard way. We're going to have to go out and do this. And that's, again, a reason why being able to adapt really fast is very, very critical. So when we learn things, when we realize the product is not optimal in certain ways, as we definitely will, as everybody does, then being able to adapt faster and course correct is really important. We do want to prioritize also just scaling our operational support, where in the beginning, we're going to be in every operating room, probably every case for at least a few months, and there with the surgeon. And that's going to make sure it works well, then also maximize the learning we get from that. We're going to have to then expand beyond that and go to remote support via video. Actually, my first company I founded was building remote support for surgery. So I know that kind of space really well. And then going to not being in the OR. We need to do that to make the company profitable and scalable. But we need to make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves. We need to put the time in and not scale overly fast to where we let things get ahead of us and find that the surgeons are not having the best experience.
Okay, so just for the sake of entertaining ourselves in our imagination, you're getting ahead of yourself. It's 5 years from now. What does the autonomous era of surgery look like?
Yeah, so 5 years from now, we'll be doing a broad range of procedures. I hope we'll be even beyond urology at that point. The plan is to. And we really will have proven out what autonomy can do for surgery. We're, for the first time, building true autonomy where AI is doing the surgical actions and it's not just like a predetermined path that it follows. There are robots now that the surgeon kind of draws a path and then the robot follows that. That's not really autonomy. I'd say it's automated, but not autonomous. So we're going to launch things way before 5 years from now that are going to show people that this is truly autonomous in a way that it is cognitively assisting the surgeon unlike anything else they've seen. And then we're going to do that over multiple procedures. So it'll be very evident to everybody that in 5 years, this is the future of surgery and that we're moving fast to capture that. And we've built something that's really unique in itself. And then I do think that others will come into the space. We already see some rumblings of that, but we're early to the space. We're not going to be the only major player for that long. And so it's important for us, again, to be fast, be nimble, and make sure we do things right and don't shoot ourselves in the foot as we scale.
At what point does autonomy shift from assistive to transformative?
We have some autonomy now, even. It's definitely what you would call assistive. I think it's going to be about 2 years till we see things that are really autonomous in a way that significantly offloads the surgeon. Not saying that it's not adding a lot of value to the surgeon before that, but that's going to be the step change where it's really freeing up their time and allowing them to do more procedures in a day at a much more significant rate.
So does autonomy replace surgeons or elevate them?
It will elevate them. We have no intention of replacing surgeons. And it's actually, there are things that surgeons do that are really hard to automate, yet low value to automate, like just, inserting the scope and other things like that, that there's still going to be a role for surgeons to to do, that they're better than robots or AI at doing those things. We want to allow the surgeon to focus on the high level decision making, that like, how am I going to treat this patient? What's the right strategy to treat this patient? And in a way, it makes surgery more human, more patient focused than the way it is now. Right now, they're spending a lot of time doing these repetitive, kind of mundane tasks, the rote actions of surgery. And that is not really where the surgeon's value is. The surgeon's value is in their understanding of patients, understanding of diseases, conditions, and then making those high level calls on what's the right treatment for this patient and how do we execute it. And then our product can do the rest, where it can do all the actions. We call it sometimes like a sous surgeon, like a sous chef, and they can delegate a lot to this, and then they can focus on the high level stuff and treat a lot more patients in a day.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you're expanding into bladder tumor removal next. How do you decide which procedures to add?
It's a combination of how much value is it to add this? I mean, how much value can we add? How much value is the procedure? How common is the procedure? And then also, is it a relatively straightforward jump from what we've done so far? So from HOLEP to bladder tumors, the mechanics of the procedure are not that difficult. It's a pretty small jump. It's in the same part of the body. A lot of the techniques are similar. There are different risks and things you need to look out for in the procedures. But I'd say about 80% of what we're doing for HOLEP could be repurposed for bladder tumors. So that makes it a nice next indication. Also, the same user does it a lot of the time. So you have surgeons, we've even seen people do a HOLEP and bladder tumor removal in the same procedure. So it's the same people that we're selling to. That's why we're staying in urology for the next few years at least, to keep focused on one user. Then we can move beyond that to other procedures where the anatomy is different, the user is different, but a lot of the techniques will still be the same.
So it seems like it's kind of like a natural extension of a natural pairing of the surgery that you guys are already focusing on.
Yeah, it's a good way to prove the platform out, but not have to do too much incremental work to get there.
I guess you'd also be compounding the surgical data from both of those surgeries. How does that help your competitive advantage?
Just showing that we can scale to different procedures is key. People don't often believe that you're going to be a platform. Every company, because you want to have investors think that your market's bigger, they say, we're going to do this first, then we're going to do all these other things later. We mean that very much. It is not just a pitching tactic. This is what the company is. It is inherently a platform. We want to scale that, show very quickly that this is something that can do multiple procedures. Then for the hospitals, that also makes their economics better, where they don't need to buy a whole new robot to do bladder tumors too. They can use the HOLEP robot for bladder tumors and then other procedures beyond that. I think as far as the surgical learnings, it'll make the models more robust, that we'll see a lot more things. We can continue to increase the number of actions and scenarios that our models learn. And that, of course, helps us scale as we do more and more procedures. That building more and more procedures gets easier.
I guess that also harkens back to what we were talking about in the very beginning about keeping the robots as simple as possible. Because from my understanding of what you said, that most likely would also help if all of the deviation is on the software side, then it keeps costs down while increasing utilization.
It does. So because we don't incur all the same costs that somebody else would, we don't make disposables for every procedure, for example. I mean, there are companies that sell a disposable that could be reusable for every procedure for $3,000 to $5,000 per case, which is a huge cost. We can be a lot more efficient. And then we can pass some of those savings on to the hospital. So it's a much more efficient model. Even though the system now rewards you making these complex hardware products, and actually reimbursement pays people more in the US to sell more expensive products, which is really backwards, that we just don't want to play that game. We're going to save the hospitals money and be able to have better margins for ourselves at the same time by focusing on software.
Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
What moment will make the broader medical community realize that this isn't science fiction anymore?
I think when we have true autonomy in a way that is obvious. For example, in HOLEP, what you have to do, it's kind of like, I didn't describe what the procedure actually is yet. I realized that you're taking all the enlarged tissue out of the prostate, kind of like removing the pulp from an orange with a scope and a laser. So you're looking around and lasering to get the enlarged tissue out. And you have to follow what's called a plane to do that. And the plane is between the capsule of the prostate, the outer part of the prostate, and the enlarged tissue. And that's part of the hard part, is following the plane. So once we have AI that can follow the plane and do the hard part of a surgery with autonomy, I think that's the moment where people realize this is something completely different. The stuff we do now, it's really helpful for the surgeon. It's not as flashy, but that'll be flashy, and it'll be something where we really make it clear this is enhancing the cognitive abilities of the surgeon. That's the big difference. It's not a physical assistance, it's a cognitive assistance.
What milestones over the next 12 to 18 months matter the most for you guys?
A lot's happening in that time frame. So we are going to be launching in multiple countries, including the US. We are going to be scaling utilization, as we talked about. We want to be growing at the goal is a rate of 10x year over year. It sounds crazy, but it should be doable with the way we've structured the product and the organization.
Nice.
And then we want to deploy these advanced autonomy features. And so we want to show, like I said, at least in a demo format, hopefully in a live patient, we can show that there is some true high-level autonomy happening here. So over the next 12 to 18 months, we should be able to do all of that.
So how have you looked at hiring?
It's been something we've had to figure out from scratch, because there's not really a blueprint for this kind of company. That we are a very much culturally a deep tech AI software company, and we're operating in this medical space. And so it has to fuse two cultures from medtech. You need people that are from medtech that have done FDA clearances, clinical trials, and those kinds of things. And you need people that are from tech that have built things like autonomy that don't exist in medtech. So a lot of our team, actually, I think the majority of our team has not worked in medtech before this. A lot of them were in autonomous vehicles. I think it gets down at the base level to the mindset that they have. They have to understand the kind of company we are. They have to understand that we are a software company, that we are not a therapeutic device. We're doing things that are tools for surgeons, and that we're moving fast. Everyone has to be a relentless optimizer. So whatever we can automate, whatever we can optimize, we should always be looking at what those things are. And then the last thing would be just getting to the base reality. I think people say first principles sometimes, that why is this the case? Don't just take an assumption for what it is. Don't just operate on medtech dogma, but why is that the case? We can't reinvent the wheel on everything, but we should understand if something's going to be inefficient for us to do. Like, do we have to do that? Is that the way it has to be? Or is there a better way to get the same result much more efficiently? So we need everybody on the team to be thinking about things in that way.
So would you say your guiding light is kind of just keep asking the question why?
It is. So we don't want to just accept things on the surface that don't make any sense. So if one big red flag for the team, we all do this too. I've done this a few times in the last week even, that I heard something and then it's like, okay, this is the case from a regulatory expert or whatever. And then people will ask why. And so we should all be in the habit of asking why. And if you can't answer that, then you need to go back and figure out why. So that's the way that it always is. So we're hiring a kind of person that's very rare in the world, that does not really exist almost at all in medtech. Some people were hiring from medtech, some people were hiring from other spaces, but finding this mentality where they want to operate in healthcare, they can operate in healthcare, but they have this first principles, assumption questioning, asking why, aggressive, automating mindset. There's not many of them. We've hired for certain roles and found we've gone through hundreds of candidates to find maybe 1 to 3 that fit. And so we're trying to hire all those people and bring them onto the team. And that's going to be a really unique advantage that we have that doesn't exist anywhere else. That's going to be the key to us building things that nobody else can build. It's possible those people will be created as this becomes a new space. People will want to get into it and adopt the mindset, though now they're very rare.
I think that's special, that it's the people behind it that make this product as revolutionary as it is.
It is. I think most startups that build great things it's the people that make that happen. I mean, it's not just some idea that's so amazing. We're not the first ones to think of autonomous surgery. I know that people like Intuitive have thought about that as the future, as the distant future probably, for a long time. So it's not like that's a unique thing. It's the people we have and our approach to do it that are going to differentiate us from somebody else who's going to try to do it. So having people that are well aligned, that are focused on the right things, that are ethical and are going to do the right things in situations like this or any AI product where there are ways it could go wrong. That's so key. And then people that can also adapt as the future is moving faster and faster. It's coming faster and faster. And so people just need to be able to adapt. And with whatever comes our way, whatever gets thrown at us, and there will be a lot, then being able to understand what's going on, what's changed, and then respond to that quickly is the most important thing.
So, are there any roles that you guys are looking to fill right now?
We are hiring across most areas of the company, software, probably one hardware person, too, and clinical trials, regulatory, quality, commercial launch. So, yeah, a lot of roles are open, and we're looking for great people that are like I described.
Well, anybody listening, if you like what you heard and you think you fit, look them up. Give it a shot. Okay. I think that's all we have for today, Nick.
Great. Thanks, Samantha. Really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, me too. This has been fascinating. If the autonomous era of surgery is coming and Andromeda intends to lead it, I'm excited to see it. And to everyone listening, this has been another episode of 8 Spotlight brought to you by 8 Capital. We'll be back soon with another founder, another story, and another company building the future. Until next time.